My mother called me every Sunday at exactly 2 p.m. 20 years I was away on SEAL missions, and she never missed that call. But on this Sunday, my phone stayed silent. By evening, I got a call from the church. She never made it home from service. And when I arrived at that parking lot and found her phone on the asphalt, screen cracked, still warm, I knew this wasn't a lost elderly woman. Someone had taken her. Someone who knew exactly who I was. Hit like, subscribe for more military stories, and comment your city or country. My name is Marcus. For 2 decades, I was a SEAL Team 6 commander. I've seen combat zones most people only have nightmares about. I've made impossible decisions in impossible situations. I've lost men under my command. I've taken lives to save lives. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment I understood that my mother, Eleanor, had vanished. It was Sunday, October 15th. I was sitting in my apartment in Arlington, Virginia, watching a football game with a beer in my hand. The kind of quiet afternoon that retirement was supposed to give me. Peace. Silence. A life where I didn't have to check shadows or count exits. I'd hung up my uniform 8 months ago. 8 months of trying to be normal. 8 months of failing. Mom called at 2 p.m. sharp, like always. She did this even when I was deployed in hostile territory. The calls would reach me through satellite phones in desert compounds, in safe houses, in the back of helicopters. Her voice was the only thing that felt like home. "Hi, baby. Just checking in," she'd say. Simple. Routine. It was our ritual. But that Sunday, my phone didn't ring. I didn't panic right away. Eleanor was 72, sharp as a knife, and had a life. She volunteered at St. Catherine's Church every Sunday morning. Sometimes she went to lunch with her friends afterward. Sometimes she ran errands. I wasn't her keeper. I was just her son trying to respect her independence. By 4 p.m., I texted her, "Mom, you okay?" Missed our call. No response. By 6 p.m., I called her landline. Nothing. Her cell went to voicemail. A voicemail greeting she'd recorded 3 years ago, her voice bright and warm. "Hi there. You've reached Eleanor. Leave me a message, and I'll get back to you." I told myself she'd forgotten to charge her phone. It happened, even to people with military precision in their blood. By 8 p.m., I was in my car driving to her house in Bethesda, 30 minutes from Arlington. 30 minutes of my mind creating scenarios I didn't want to imagine. Her house was dark. Lights off. Front door locked. I used my key and went inside. Kitchen was clean. Living room untouched. Her purse was on the hall table, right where she always left it. But her car was gone. My chest tightened. I called the Arlington Police Department first. They took a report, but their tone was dismissive. An elderly woman missing for 6 hours wasn't an emergency to them. Not yet. "She's probably at a friend's house," the dispatcher said. "Give it time." I called St. Catherine's next. Father Mitchell answered. "Marcus? Is everything all right? My mother came to service this morning, right?" "Eleanor." There was a pause. I could feel the shift in his voice. "Yes, she was here. Beautiful service today. She helped with the flowers, as she always does. She left right after, around 12:30. Said she was heading home to make pot roast for." He stopped. "Why? What's wrong?" "She never made it home." I hung up and drove to St. Catherine's. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just a few cars scattered under the streetlights. I drove slowly, looking for anything out of place. And then I saw it. Her phone. It was lying near the curb, partially under a car. The screen was cracked, spiderwebbed in the corner. When I picked it up, it was still warm. And there was something else, a small strand of fabric caught under the phone's edge. Dark red fabric. I'd seen enough crime scenes to know what that meant. My hands went cold. I called 911 and reported her missing as a possible abduction. This time, the police took it seriously. Within an hour, Detective Page showed up with her partner. Page was sharp, mid-40s, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much. She took my statement, examined Eleanor's phone, and photographed everything. "Your mother live alone?" she asked. "Yes. My father passed 15 years ago." "Any family tensions? Estrangement? Money problems?" "No. Nothing like that. Paige exchanged a look with her partner. That look meant something. That look meant they'd seen this pattern before. Mr. Marcus, she said carefully, we need to ask you some personal questions. Your background, your military service, has it put anyone at risk? Anyone with a grudge? Anyone who might want leverage against you? The question landed like a punch. I didn't answer right away, because the answer was yes. The answer was always yes in my line of work. I'd spent 20 years making enemies in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. I'd stopped counting after the first 100. Maybe, I finally said. It's possible. We'll need your military records. Anyone you've apprehended, anyone you've... My phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text message with an attachment. No words. Just a video file and a timestamp from 2 hours ago. With shaking hands, I opened it. The video showed my mother in a concrete room, hands zip-tied. Her face was bruised. Her church dress was torn. And standing over her was a man with cold eyes and a scar running down the left side of his face. He spoke directly to the camera in a Russian accent. Hello, Commander Marcus. We have your mother. You have 72 hours to give us what we want, or she dies screaming. The video ended. Detective Page's face went white. Do you know who that is? She whispered. I did. I knew exactly who that was. And I knew my retirement was over. The man in the video was Viktor Sokolov, Russian cartel, former GRU operative turned organized crime kingpin. I'd crossed paths with him exactly once, during a classified operation in Transnistria in 2008. We didn't fight. We were on opposite sides of a covert negotiation that ended in a stalemate. But he never forgot a face. More importantly, he never forgot a defeat. Detective Page was calling the FBI. I was staring at my phone, watching that video again on repeat. My mother's bruised face. The zip ties cutting into her wrists. The casual way Victor stood over her, like she was nothing. Like she was just leverage. We're bringing in the field office, Page said, hanging up. This is federal now. Terrorism, kidnapping, extortion. We're talking interstate criminal conspiracy. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about Eleanor, about how she'd spent her entire life waiting for me to come home from deployments. How she'd never complained when I missed holidays, birthdays, anniversaries. How she'd supported every choice I made, even when it meant not having a son around to support her back. And now some ghost from my past had her. My doorbell rang at 9:47 p.m. I opened it to find Vivian standing there in a black coat, her face flushed, her breathing heavy like she'd been running. Vivian, my ex-wife. We'd been separated for 3 years, divorced for 2. She was the ghost I'd been trying to forget. I heard, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. About your mother. The police contacted me. They're asking everyone who knows you. How did you get here so fast? She didn't answer. She just looked around the apartment like she was searching for something or someone. Vivian, what are you? Did they show you the video? She interrupted, her voice shaking. Something in her tone made me freeze. How do you know about the video? It just came in an hour ago. She sat down hard on my couch. For a moment, she just stared at her hands. Then she looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine fear. Because I knew it was coming, she whispered. The world tilted. What are you talking about? Marcus, she stopped. Started again. I've been in contact with someone. A man named Pavel. He said he had information about your old operations. Military secrets. Safe house locations. Things like that. He said people would pay a lot of money for that kind of information. I felt the blood drain from my face. Vivian, tell me you didn't. He said it was just information. Cold War stuff. Nothing active. Nothing that would hurt anyone. Vivian. He paid me $5,000 a month to answer questions. Email him updates about where you were, who you were seeing, if you had any visitors from the agency. That's all. That's all it was supposed to be. I grabbed her by the shoulders. Not violently, but firm. How long? 6 months. Maybe 7. 7 months. Eleanor had been missing for 6 hours, and my ex-wife had been feeding her location, my family details, my entire post-retirement life, to a Russian cartel operative for 7 months. Does Pavel work for Sokolov? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Why? I asked. The question sounded hollow even to me. I knew why. I'd always known why. Because you chose the Navy over me. You chose that uniform, those men, those missions. You chose everything except being my husband. I spent 20 years waiting for you to come home, and when you finally did retire, you were a ghost. You didn't know how to be anything except a SEAL. You couldn't even talk to me without checking the exits. You couldn't sleep without your hand on a weapon. You weren't there, Marcus. Not really. So when Pavel offered me money, offered me something that felt like power for once, I took it. I released her and stepped back. They have my mother, I said quietly. I didn't think they'd actually do this. I swear to God, I didn't know they were going to take her. Pavel said it was just leverage, just insurance in case you got uncooperative about something. I thought it was a bluff. I thought. The doorbell rang again. This time it was FBI Special Agent Colin. Mid-50s, built like a boxer, with the kind of intensity that came from 20 years in counterintelligence. He had a junior agent with him, and they both took in the scene. Me, Vivian, the tension hanging in the air like smoke. We need to talk, Collins said, looking directly at me. All of us. They didn't read Vivian her rights immediately. They just started asking questions. Where had Pavel contacted her? What was his real name? What information had she given him? How much money had changed hands? Every answer seemed to make Colin's jaw tighter. Finally, Colin turned to me. Sokolov's been on our radar for 2 years. We've been building a case, but he's careful. Very careful. Your mother's abduction, it's not random. This is calculated. He's sending you a message. What message? That you belong to him now. That your past has a price, and he's collecting. Colin pulled out a second video file on his laptop. This one had arrived at FBI headquarters an hour after the first video was sent to me. You need to see this, he said. He pressed play. It was Victor again, but this time he was in a different room. Nicer. Almost luxurious. He was holding a photograph. A photograph of me. But not recent. This was from 2008. From Transnistria. From the operation where we'd first crossed paths. Hello, Commander, Victor said to the camera, his Russian accent thick and deliberate. You remember me, yes? Of course you do. You were so professional that day. So cold. You let me walk away, and I have not forgotten your mercy. Now, I will show you what mercy looks like. The video cut to Eleanor again. But this time, she wasn't just bruised. There were burn marks on her arms. Fresh ones. 72 hours, Victor said. You give me coordinates to 3 agency safe houses in Eastern Europe. You give me the names of 5 active SEAL team operatives. And you give me proof that you can access the systems. Then your mother gets to come home. The video ended. I looked at Colin. He's bluffing. He knows I can't access those systems anymore. I've been retired for 8 months. But he doesn't know that for certain, Collins said. And that's the problem. He's betting you'll try. He's betting you'll reach out to people who can help you. And when you do, we'll have a trail. That's what he's counting on. So what do I do? Colin leaned back in his chair. You do exactly what he asks. But you do it through us. We set up a controlled exchange. We monitor everything. And we use it to bring down his entire network. Vivian was crying quietly on my couch. Colin's junior agent was reading her rights now. She was going to prison. She'd betrayed me, betrayed my family, betrayed every SEAL who'd trusted me with their location and their lives. But all I could think about was my mother's face in that video. All I could think about was the burn marks on her arms. And all I could feel was a cold, familiar rage. The kind I'd learned to suppress 20 years ago. The kind that made me dangerous. I have one question, I said to Colin. What's that? If this goes wrong, if anything happens to my mother because we're playing by your rules, what happens to Sokolov? Colin looked at me for a long moment. Then you handle it your way, he said quietly. And we never had this conversation. The interrogation room was cold and gray. Vivian sat across from Colin and his partner, her hands trembling as she answered their questions. I watched through the one-way glass. every answer cutting deeper than the last. How many times did Pavel contact you? Colin asked. Twice a week. Sometimes more. Always encrypted messages. Always through different apps. Did he ever mention what they were planning to do with the information? He said it was just for profit, that they sold intelligence to other organizations. He promised it was nothing that would hurt active operations. It was a lie and we all knew it. By 3 a.m., Vivian had given them everything. Pavel's encrypted contact details, the payment schedules, screenshots of conversations where she'd provided my location, the names of my friends from the team who still visited occasionally, details about my apartment security. 72 pages of betrayal. Colin found me in the hallway outside. We're going to prosecute her, he said flatly. Conspiracy to commit extortion. Providing classified information to foreign nationals. She's looking at 10 to 15 years. I nodded. I didn't feel anything. Not yet. That would come later, probably at 3 a.m. on some sleepless night. What about Eleanor? I asked. We're setting up the exchange for tomorrow evening. We've got a team ready. Safe house in Fairfax. You'll make the call to Sokolov. Confirm you have what he wants. We'll have the files ready. Everything encrypted and tracked. When they bring your mother to the pickup point, we move in. And if it goes wrong? Colin didn't answer. I went home to shower and change. The apartment felt different now. Contaminated. Every memory of Vivian suddenly looked like a lie. The photographs on the bookshelf. Us at Niagara Falls. Us at her sister's wedding. Us at a SEAL team fundraiser where I was actually smiling. All of it felt poisoned. I stood under the hot water for 20 minutes, trying to wash away the feeling of being invaded. She'd been in my bed, in my kitchen, in my life, feeding my details to wolves the entire time. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Commander, Pavel here. Your ex-wife gave us very useful information. She's quite bitter about you, you know. Makes her very cooperative. Do you have what we want? I didn't respond. Another text came through. Your mother is still alive. For now. The burn marks on her arms? That was just to show we're serious. If you give us what we want by tomorrow night, she comes home relatively unharmed. If you try anything heroic, she dies. And then we find your friends. And then their families. Do you understand? My hands clenched. 20 years of training kicked in, breathing exercises, tactical assessment, emotional compartmentalization. But none of it worked. All I could see was Eleanor's face. At 6 a.m., Colin picked me up. We drove to a nondescript office building in Arlington, underground garage, elevator to the 3rd sublevel. The FBI's safe house for operations like this. There were 8 agents prepped, plus a tech specialist named Hunter who looked like he was barely old enough to vote. Hunter had set up the entire operation. Fake files that looked real but were actually tracking devices, encrypted communications that would lead back to Sokolov's location, everything designed to catch him in the act. The files are ready, Hunter said, sliding a secure phone across the table. When you call Sokolov, tell him you have everything he wants. You'll arrange a pickup at the Arlington Park parking structure at 8 p.m. Ground level, Section C. Your mother will be in one vehicle. The files will be in another. Simple exchange. Simple, I repeated. We'll have snipers positioned on the surrounding roofs, Colin added. Tactical teams ready to move. The moment your mother is clear, we apprehend everyone at the scene. And if they have shooters? Then we have better shooters. I made the call at noon. Pavel answered on the second ring. Commander, you have what we want. I have it. All 3 locations. 5 operatives. Full system access codes. There was a pause. I could almost hear him calculating. Your wife was very helpful in explaining your character. She said you were capable, but emotionally weak. That family matters more to you than honor. That you can be broken by taking what you love. My jaw clenched. She said you'd do anything, to save her mother. Is that true, Commander? Yes. Good. Then we have an agreement. Tonight, 8 p.m., Arlington Park. Bring the files. Bring yourself. Come alone, or your mother dies. Bring police, or your mother dies. Bring military, or your mother dies. Understand. I understand. He hung up. Colin was already on his radio. All units. We're live at 2,000 hours. I repeat, operation is green at 2,000 hours. Stand by. The next 8 hours moved like molasses. I sat in that safe house, watching monitors, eating food I didn't taste, trying not to think about what might go wrong. The tactical team reviewed the plan 17 times. They showed me satellite images of the parking structure, marked escape routes, established communication protocols. Hunter came and sat next to me around 6 p.m. First extraction? He asked. No. I've done 100 extractions, but never to save someone I love. That's the difference between a soldier and a human being, Hunter said quietly. Soldiers can compartmentalize. Humans can't. At 7:15 p.m., Colin handed me a small earpiece. You'll be wired. We'll hear everything. Don't try to be a hero, Marcus. Just make the exchange and get clear. I nodded. At 7:45 p.m., I was in an unmarked car driving toward Arlington Park. The files were in a secure case next to me. My mother's location was somewhere in the darkness, probably only 3 miles from where I was driving. I'd spent 20 years rescuing people in hostile territory, but I'd never felt this helpless, because the person I was rescuing had raised me. The person I was trying to save had made me human when I was just a weapon, and I'd let someone I'd slept next to for 12 years betray her. As I pulled into the parking structure and saw the headlights of another vehicle approaching in the shadows, I realized something. Vivian hadn't just betrayed me. She'd proven that love was the one weapon I had no defense against. And Sokolov knew it. The parking structure was silent except for the sound of my engine echoing off concrete walls. Ground level, Section C. My headlights cut through the darkness and caught 2 vehicles ahead, a black SUV and a panel van. I've got visual, Colin's voice crackled in my ear. 2 vehicles, for tangos outside the SUV, 2 in the van. Snipers have eyes on all targets. You're clear to proceed. I pulled the car forward slowly, keeping my hands visible on the steering wheel. The case with the files sat on the passenger seat beside me, heavy with the weight of what it contained. A man emerged from the SUV. Tall, scarred face. Viktor Sokolov himself. Not what I expected. I'd thought he'd send intermediaries, stay hidden. But he'd come. That meant he didn't believe the files were real. That meant he was planning something. I stepped out of the car. Commander Marcus, Viktor said, walking toward me with his hands at his sides. He was smiling. You look older than your photographs. The weight of command, yes? It ages men. Where's my mother? In the van. Alive. Relatively unharmed, as promised. You have the files. I opened the passenger door and retrieved the case. Viktor's men tensed immediately, hands moving toward weapons. Easy, I said quietly. Just the files. Like we agreed. I walked toward Viktor, keeping my pace steady, my breathing controlled. My snipers had clear shots if this went wrong. But if it went wrong, Eleanor died. You know what fascinates me about you, Commander? Viktor continued, circling me slowly. Your ex-wife told me something very interesting. She said you spent 20 years running from your family, running from love, running from responsibility. And now you're here, ready to sell your country's secrets to save the very woman you abandoned. I never abandoned my mother. No? You abandoned your wife, though. For what? Duty? Honor? Those are words, Commander. Your wife needed a man, and you gave her a ghost. I didn't respond. He was trying to manipulate me, trying to make me emotional, trying to break my focus. It was working. The files, I said, extending the case. Viktor took it and handed it to one of his men, who opened it and began examining the contents. The man looked up and nodded. It's legitimate, the man said in Russian. Encryption protocols match the agency standards. Good, Viktor said. Now we have a problem. My blood went cold. What problem? The problem is that I still can't trust you. These files could be real, or they could be bait. How do I know you haven't already warned the agency? How do I know they're not tracking this exchange right now? They're not. I came alone, like you asked. Did you? Viktor gestured to the surrounding roofs. Because I have men positioned on every roof within 1,000 yards of this structure. And I can see your snipers. 3 on the north side, 2 on the east. Your tactical team is parked 2 blocks away, waiting for my signal. So the question becomes, how do we proceed when we both know the other is lying? I heard Colin's voice in my ear. Stand down. We're pulling the teams back. Repeat, we're standing down. My heart was pounding. Victor had been prepared for this. He'd known the FBI would be here, which meant he had inside information, which meant Vivian told you the FBI would be involved. I said, your wife told us everything, including that the FBI would try to intercept us here. She even gave us the names of the agents involved. Agent Colin, very competent man, which is why I came in person. To show good faith, you might say. Victor pulled out his phone and made a call in Russian. I heard only fragments, pull back, and 5 minutes, and yes, he's watching us. Then he turned back to me. Here's what's going to happen, Commander. In exactly 4 minutes, your mother will walk out of that van. You will get in that van, and you will come with us. You will verify these files are real. You will install the access codes personally, and then, only then, will we release you. If the FBI tries to follow, if they try to intervene at any point, your mother dies. If you don't cooperate completely, your mother dies. Do you understand? You said you'd let her go. I lied. But I will let her go, as long as you cooperate. And as long as you don't do anything heroic. The van door opened. Eleanor emerged slowly, her movements stiff, her face bruised. But she was walking. She was alive. She looked at me across the parking structure, and I saw something in her eyes that broke something inside me. Not fear, not despair, but defiance. Pure, fierce defiance. She knew this was a trap, and she didn't care. Mom, go, I called out. No, she said firmly. Her voice carried across the concrete. Not without you. Eleanor, Victor said, his tone changing. Get in the car with your son. Say goodbye. But Eleanor didn't move. She stood there in the darkness, 72 years old, bruised and broken, and she looked directly at Victor. I know who you are, she said quietly. I've been listening to everything. Every conversation. Every plan. And I know you're going to kill him either way. You can't let him live. He knows too much. Victor's expression hardened. Your mother has an interesting perspective, he said to me. Too bad she's wrong. But I could see it in his face. She was right. And he knew I knew. Colin's voice crackled in my ear. We're back in position. Say the word, Marcus. Eleanor started walking toward me. Victor raised his hand slightly. His men reached for their weapons. And in that split second, I realized that the only way out of this was not through the FBI's careful plan. It was through my mother's courage. It was through the one thing Victor hadn't accounted for, that Eleanor wasn't just a hostage. She was a fighter, just like me. Everything happened in slow motion and fast forward at the same time. Eleanor ran toward me. Victor's men moved to stop her. Colin's voice screamed in my ear, go, go, go. The first shots came from the north rooftop. A sniper round took out the man nearest to Eleanor. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward my car with a strength that surprised me. Get down, I yelled, covering her as gunfire erupted across the parking structure. Victor was already moving toward the SUV, his men providing cover fire. The FBI tactical teams came in from 2 directions, and suddenly the quiet parking lot became a war zone. The sound of gunfire bounced off concrete walls like thunder. I got Eleanor into my car and hit the accelerator. Behind us, I could hear Colin's voice directing the teams, hear the chaos of the firefight. But we were moving, and that was all that mattered. Are you hit? I asked, not taking my eyes off the road. No, I'm fine, Eleanor said, her breathing heavy. I'm fine. Just drive. We exited the parking structure and merged onto the street. In my mirror, I could see law enforcement vehicles converging on the scene. The exchange had turned into a tactical operation. Victor had slipped away. I could feel it. Men like him always did. But Eleanor was safe. That was what mattered. I took back roads to a safe house Colin had mentioned, a residential property in Fairfax that the FBI maintained for operations like this. Eleanor sat beside me in silence, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes staring out the window at the passing darkness. "Mom, I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry I let this happen." "This isn't your fault," she said quietly. "It is. My past. My enemies. My choices." Eleanor turned to look at me. In the darkness of the car, I could see her bruises more clearly now. Burns on her forearms. Cuts on her hands. Her church dress was torn and stained. "Marcus, listen to me. For 20 years, I watched you punish yourself for being good at something. You became a SEAL because you were strong. You became a commander because you were capable. You didn't choose to have enemies. You chose to protect people. And yes, that choice had consequences. But don't you dare apologize for being the man I raised." We arrived at the safe house. It was a modest two-story colonial in a quiet neighborhood. Unmarked. Secure. A paramedic was waiting for us. Colin had arranged for medical evaluation without hospital documentation. The paramedic's name was Paige. Mid-30s, professional, kind. She examined Eleanor's burns carefully, documented everything, and prescribed antibiotics and pain management. Nothing that required hospitalization, but everything that suggested Eleanor had been tortured systematically. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Paige said quietly to me while Eleanor was resting in the bedroom. "These burns are precise. Strategic. Not rage. Planning." "They were sending a message," I said. "To you or to her?" "I hadn't considered that." "What do you mean?" "I mean, some people break under torture. Some people get stronger. Your mother, she didn't break. These burns, they're weeks old. Some are newer. They tortured her repeatedly, but she didn't give them anything. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. At least, not where they could hear her." I felt something shift in my chest. Eleanor hadn't just survived captivity. She'd resisted it. At midnight, Colin arrived. He looked exhausted and furious. "We lost him," he said immediately. "Victor slipped out through a maintenance tunnel in the parking structure. We found 3 of his men dead, 2 captured. But Victor's gone. We're coordinating with international law enforcement, but he's in the wind." I finished. "For now? But we have those 2 men in custody. They're going to talk. And we have Vivian's testimony. We can build a case. A case that takes years. Victor takes years. And my mother is safe," Colin interrupted. "Right now, she's safe. That's what matters." But it wasn't what mattered. Not entirely. Eleanor came downstairs at 2 a.m. She couldn't sleep. I found her in the kitchen making tea, moving slowly but deliberately around the space like she was reclaiming ownership of her own body. "Talk to me," I said, sitting across from her at the small kitchen table. "About what?" "About what happened. About how you survived." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her hands wrapped around the warm mug. "When they first took me, I was terrified. They put me in a concrete room. No windows. Just a cot and a bucket. The man with the scar, Victor, he came to see me the first day. He told me I was leverage, that I was worth more to him alive than dead, as long as you cooperated. That gave me hope." She took a sip of tea. "But then they started asking questions. They wanted to know about your routine, your friends, your safe houses. They wanted information I didn't have. And when I couldn't give them what they wanted, they burned me." I felt my hands clench. "But something happened after the first few times," Eleanor continued. "The pain stopped being terrible. It became something I could measure, something I could prepare for. And I realized they were following a pattern. Same time every day. Same questions. Same burns in the same places." "You were studying them," I said. "I was surviving them," Eleanor corrected. "But yes, I noticed things. One of the guards, a young man, maybe 25, he left the door unlocked once. Not by accident. He looked at me when he did it. And that's when I knew, not everyone there wanted to hurt me. My mother had done in a concrete cell what I'd spent 20 years learning in SEAL training. She'd found the weakness, found the human element, found the way out. There was a girl," Eleanor said. "The guard's friend, I think. She brought me food when the others weren't looking. better food, fresh water. She never spoke to me, but she was kind. She helped me survive. Do you know who she was? No, but I'll never forget her face. Colin appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, he said to both of us, about what happens next, and about something Eleanor told our interrogation team. Something we didn't expect. Colin pulled out a folder and spread several photographs across the kitchen table. Surveillance images, security footage stills. They showed a young woman, early 20s, dark hair, Eastern European features. She appeared in multiple locations, outside a church, at a coffee shop, near a hospital. This is Paige Sokoloff, Colin said. Victor's daughter. I stared at the photographs, then at Eleanor, then back at Colin. I don't understand, I said. Eleanor reached across the table and took my hand. The girl who helped me, she said quietly. The one who brought food. The one who left the door unlocked. It was her. How is that possible? I asked. How would Victor's daughter? Because she's been trying to escape her father for years, Colin interrupted. She ran away when she was 19. Changed her identity. Got a job. Tried to build a normal life. But Victor found her 6 months ago. Started forcing her to work for him again. She's been his inside person ever since. But she's been looking for a way out. Colin pulled out more photographs. These ones showed Paige at St. Catherine's Church. Volunteering. Organizing flower arrangements. Talking to parishioners. She met your mother at church, Colin continued. They became friends. When Victor decided to take Eleanor as leverage against you, Paige knew about it. She was horrified, and she did everything she could to protect your mother without blowing her cover. Eleanor nodded. She told me to memorize details, to watch the guards, to notice patterns. She said if I could give you information about Victor's operation, you could help her get away from him. She's been gathering intelligence? I asked. More than that, Colin said. She's been documenting everything. Safe house locations, operational details, financial records, names of corrupt officials who work with the cartel. For months, she's been building a case against her own father. I felt the weight of it. A young woman trapped in her father's criminal empire, using her access to gather evidence against him, risking her life every single day. Where is she now? Eleanor asked. Safe house. She's been debriefed. She's agreed to testify against Victor and his entire operation in exchange for witness protection and immunity from prosecution for her involvement. Colin looked directly at me. This changes everything, Marcus. With Paige's testimony and documentation, we don't need your cooperation anymore. We don't need the fake files or the exchange. We can prosecute Victor for kidnapping, torture, extortion, human trafficking, money laundering, racketeering. We can dismantle his entire network. What about Victor himself? I asked. He's still out there. For now. But Interpol has him flagged. Every border crossing, every airport, will find him. It's just a matter of time. Eleanor squeezed my hand. There's something else you should know, Colin said. Paige asked to speak with you. She was in a separate safe house, guarded by federal agents. When I met her, I understood immediately why Eleanor had trusted her. Paige had her father's eyes, dark, intense, but where Victor's were cold, hers were filled with pain and defiance. Thank you for protecting my mother, I said. I did what I could, Paige replied. Her accent was slight, barely noticeable. Your mother, she was kind to me. She didn't know who I was, but she treated me like a person, like I mattered. I hadn't felt that in years. Why did you help her? Paige looked away for a moment. Because I'm tired of being my father's weapon. I'm tired of watching him hurt people. I'm tired of pretending I'm someone I'm not. She turned back to me. Your mother told me something while I was bringing her food. She said that every person has a choice, to become what circumstances force them to be, or to become what they choose to be. She said my father made his choice, but I could still make mine. And you chose to betray him. I chose to survive differently than he did. There's a difference. Over the next 3 days, Paige gave the FBI everything. She provided the location of 3 safe houses. She identified 15 people working in Victor's operation. She gave them financial records that traced money laundering through Eastern European banks. She gave them the names of 2 U.S. senators and a federal judge who were on Victor's payroll. It was devastating. It was comprehensive. It was going to take Victor's entire network down. And it came with a cost. Paige would never be able to contact her family again. She would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, knowing her father would never stop trying to find her. Eleanor spent time with her before Paige went into witness protection. When they said goodbye, Eleanor held her like she was her own daughter. "You did the right thing," Eleanor told her. "Even though it costs everything. Your son will be safe now," Paige replied. "That's what matters." After she was gone, Eleanor sat with me in the safe house living room. Outside, the world was moving forward. The FBI was executing warrants. News was breaking about the Cartel network. Vivian was in federal custody awaiting trial. "Mom, I need to apologize again," I said. "For what?" "For Vivian. For not seeing what was happening. For being so wrapped up in my own isolation that I didn't notice that she was unhappy." Eleanor interrupted. "Marcus, I knew your wife was unhappy. I tried to tell you. But you were so focused on being the perfect soldier that you forgot to be the perfect husband. That's not your failure alone. She made her choices too. I still let down everyone I loved." Eleanor took my face in her hands, something she'd done when I was a boy, something she hadn't done in years. "Listen to me. You did not let me down. You came for me. And because you did, a young woman found the courage to stand up to her father. Because you loved me, justice is coming. Do you understand? Your love didn't fail. It changed everything." The federal courthouse in Alexandria was cold and imposing. It took 6 months to bring Victor to justice. 6 months of international coordination, witness protection logistics, and careful legal maneuvering. But Interpol found him trying to cross into Moldova under a false identity. He was extradited back to the United States in chains. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Paige testified via secure video link from an undisclosed location. She described in clinical detail the operations of her father's criminal enterprise. Names, dates, financial transactions, safe houses, torture chambers, everything. When Victor's defense attorney tried to suggest she was lying out of spite, Paige remained calm and devastating. "I'm not testifying out of hate," she said. "I'm testifying because my father is a criminal. And because your mother," she looked directly at Eleanor in the courtroom gallery, "taught me that some things matter more than family loyalty." Eleanor sat in the front row every single day. She wore simple dresses. She brought a notebook. She took notes on everything. When Victor looked at her from the defendant's table, she didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She met his eyes with the same defiance I'd seen in that parking lot. The prosecutors presented financial records showing millions in money laundering. They presented testimony from the 2 captured cartel operatives, men who were now looking at lengthy prison sentences and had decided cooperation was their only path to reduce time. They presented medical evidence documenting Eleanor's torture. The defense tried everything. They attacked Paige's credibility. They suggested the FBI had manufactured evidence. They claimed Victor was being framed by business rivals. Nothing worked. The judge was a woman named Judith Sterling, 58 years old, career prosecutor turned judge. She listened to every word with absolute attention, took notes in meticulous handwriting, and never showed a hint of emotion. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, including kidnapping, torture, extortion, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit terrorism, the courtroom was silent. Victor didn't react. He just stared ahead like a man who'd already accepted his fate long ago. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. Eleanor was allowed to make a victim impact statement. She stood up slowly, approached the podium, and looked directly at Judge Sterling. She didn't look at Victor, didn't acknowledge him at all. "My name is Eleanor Marcus," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I was kidnapped and tortured by this man for 43 days. He burned my skin. He broke my fingers. He threatened to kill my son. He tried to break me. She paused, looking down at her hands, hands that still bore the scars of those burns. But he failed, not because I'm stronger than him, not because I'm braver, but because I had something to live for. I had a son who loved me. I had a faith in God. I had memories of a life worth surviving for. And I had a moment of kindness from someone I didn't expect it from, his own daughter, who showed me that even in darkness, there are people choosing light. Eleanor looked up at the judge. I ask that you sentence this man to life imprisonment, not out of revenge, but because he will never stop hurting people, because he sees human beings as tools, because he needs to spend the rest of his life understanding that his actions have consequences, and because justice, real justice, means protecting innocent people from monsters. When she sat down, Eleanor was crying silently, not from pain, from release. Judge Sterling sentenced Victor to life without parole, plus an additional 40 years. She ordered restitution to Eleanor and to other victims identified during the investigation. She issued a statement from the bench that this case represented a significant victory against organized crime operations trafficking in human suffering. This defendant viewed human beings as commodities, Judge Sterling said. His daughter showed more humanity in a moment of kindness than this man has shown in his entire life. Victor was led away in handcuffs, still showing no emotion. He was 63 years old. He would die in prison. The trial's aftermath rippled through the intelligence community. The two senators on Victor's payroll resigned immediately to avoid prosecution. The federal judge cooperated with authorities and received immunity in exchange for testimony. The FBI dismantled 13 separate cells of the Cartel network across Europe and North America. But what struck me most was something quieter. 3 weeks after the sentencing, I received a letter forwarded through Colin. It was from Paige. She couldn't give me her location, but she could send me a message. Dear Marcus, I'm writing to thank you for being the kind of man who fights for his mother. In my world, family loyalty is a weapon. In your world, it's a strength. I'm learning the difference. Your mother saved my life. Not by grand gestures, but by treating me like I was worth saving. She showed me that I didn't have to be my father's daughter. I could choose my own path. I'm starting a new life now. I'm in school. I'm studying psychology. I want to help people like me, people trapped in cycles of violence and control. I want to prove that even those of us born into darkness can choose to become light. Thank you for everything. Tell your mother that I think of her every day. With gratitude and hope. Paige. Eleanor read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in a frame on her mantle, right next to photographs of me as a boy. She's going to be okay, Eleanor said quietly. That girl is going to be more than okay. And I realized that my mother had been right all along. Justice wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making Victor suffer the way he'd made us suffer. Justice was about accountability, about consequences, about protecting future victims. Victor would spend the rest of his life in a cell, and he would deserve every second of it. But more importantly, Paige was free. Eleanor was healing, and the network of criminals he'd built was dismantled. That was justice. Quiet, thorough, complete. 1 year later, I stood in the gymnasium of a veterans center in Arlington. The building was freshly renovated, walls painted warm colors, photographs of fallen soldiers displayed with dignity and respect. I was there for the grand opening of a new program, one I'd spent the last 12 months building. The Marcus Foundation for Transitional Support, named after my mother. Eleanor stood beside me, her hand linked through my arm, wearing a navy dress and a smile that reached her eyes. The burns on her arms had faded to pale scars. The trauma would never fully disappear, but she'd chosen to transform it into something meaningful. You did this, she whispered to me as people filed in. We did this, I corrected. Together. The Foundation's mission was simple: help combat veterans transition back to civilian life. Counseling, job training, financial literacy, community building. Everything I'd lacked when I left the Navy. Everything that might have prevented me from becoming so isolated that I couldn't see my wife was drowning. The keynote speaker was Judge Judith Sterling. She talked about accountability, about how justice means investing in prevention, not just punishment. She talked about Eleanor's courage and how it inspired the entire federal system to examine how they treated victims of organized crime. When the ceremony ended, people approached me with gratitude. Some were veterans I'd served with, now struggling with civilian life. Some were family members of those veterans, desperate for support. Some were just people who'd heard the story and wanted to help. Eleanor held court in the corner, speaking with a group of older women. She was already recruiting volunteers, already talking about expanding the foundation's reach. She'd found her purpose in the wreckage of her trauma. That evening, we sat on her porch, the same porch where she'd waited for my calls during 20 years of deployments. The autumn air was cool and clear. She handed me a cup of tea, the same way she had 1,000 times before. "I got a letter today," Eleanor said quietly. "From Paige." My chest tightened. We rarely heard from her anymore. The witness protection program kept her isolated for her own safety. Eleanor pulled out the letter. It was short, written in careful handwriting. "Dear Eleanor, I wanted you to know that I graduated. Associate degree in psychology. I start my bachelor's program next semester. I'm working at a nonprofit that helps trafficking victims. Some days are hard. Some days I miss my old life, believe it or not. But most days, I'm grateful. I'm grateful because I had a mother for 43 days. And that was enough to change who I became. Thank you for choosing to be that for me. Love, Paige." I felt tears on my face, something that still happens sometimes when I wasn't guarding myself so carefully. "She's going to be okay," Eleanor said, the same words she'd said after the trial. "We're all going to be okay," I replied. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't quite true. We'd carry this with us forever. The scars, the memories, the understanding of how fragile everything really is. But we'd also carry something else, the knowledge that we'd survived, that we'd chosen light over darkness, that we'd transformed suffering into meaning. 3 months later, I received a visit from Colin. He looked older than when we'd first met, but there was peace in his eyes. "I wanted you to know," he said, "that we've finally found Victor's financial network. We're dismantling it now. It's going to take years, but we're getting everything. Every penny he stole, every operation he funded, it's all coming down." "Good," I said simply. "I also wanted to tell you," Colin continued, "that what you and your mother did, what Paige did, it changed how we operate. We're investing more in victim support, more in rehabilitation programs. You've influenced the entire system." After he left, Eleanor asked me a question that she'd been building up to for months. "Do you regret the life you chose?" she asked. "The Navy? The SEALs? Even knowing how it ended?" I thought about this carefully. 20 years of service. 20 years of sacrifice. Vivian's betrayal. Eleanor's torture. The trauma that would echo through the rest of our lives. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. I regret the choices I made within it. I regret not protecting what mattered most. But I don't regret becoming a person strong enough to fight for what matters. I just wish I'd learned that lesson sooner." Eleanor smiled, that same smile from when I was a boy, full of pride and unconditional love. "Well," she said, "you've learned it now. Dear viewers, I want to ask you something personal. Where are you watching from? What city? What country? Tell me in the comments below. I want to know who's hearing this story. And more than that, I want to know what stories speak to your heart. Do you love military tales? Family dramas? Stories about redemption and second chances? Stories about quiet revenge and justice served cold? Tell me. Comment down below exactly what kind of stories make you come back. What keeps you watching until the end? Because here's what I learned from this journey. Stories matter. Not just as entertainment, but as reminders of who we can become. I'm going to bring you more stories just like this one. Epic tales of revenge, of betrayal, of people finding strength they didn't know they had. Stories that will make you feel something real. So hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. And in the comments, tell me your city and what kind of stories turn you on. Tell me what you want to see next, because your voice matters. Your story matters. I'll be back soon with another thriller. Another tale that will grip you and won't let go until the very end. Stay tuned. And remember, the strongest people aren't always the ones who fight the hardest. Sometimes they're the ones who choose to heal. Story is finished.